motionless, thank you.
Should have run through that. We won't bother. Dave, please continue.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it. So I've presented this a few different times over the past year. I realize this is the first time I'm presenting this in front of your committee. And so if I gloss over something or if it's not clear, let me know. There's been quite a bit of work that's been performed on this project over the past 3 years now. And there's still quite a bit of work that's left to do. This project was initiated back in August 2022, initially born from the backside of a capital budget ask for turf fields that eventually evolved into a discussion around improving the grass field surfaces at our recreation facilities, Lowell being one of them. And so back then, one of the, I guess, easier things to try and do to provide irrigation or water to the site, to have an overburden type of well system. Tests were done for that. That was not an option at that point in time. And so since it looked like wells were going to need to be done from there, a fracture trace analysis was done, which is, from my understanding, the best way to try to identify if you're going to dig wells, try and determine where the best locations may be possible using this process. So the wells were originally developed in November of 2023. At that point in time, the yield of the wells were not sufficient enough where you could irrigate the Lowell facility with it. And so the recommendation from our consultants at that point in time was to do a process called aquafreed. The aquafreed, the purpose of it was to enhance the wells. You want to think of it as a water, if I understand the process correctly, it's a carbon dioxide water pressure based type of fracking. I don't think fracking is the exact word we want to use for it, but it's trying to make the fissures larger so you have better yield in your well. From there, once we understood, did you get an improvement on the yields that was sufficient where you could do an irrigation system? It did require changing the design in order to do it. We were hoping initially that this would be something that you'd have enough of a high enough flow rate where you wouldn't need to have a storage system, because that was something that would be needed based on the yield of the wells. The design had to be changed and updated. We just lost the presentation.
I just admitted someone to it.
So at that point, aside from creating a new design and starting to work on bid documents, it's pretty clear that it was going to change what was necessary to power the system. At that point, Eversource was brought in, and they provided also a design for the power that we need to be brought into the site. Today, there's absolutely no power at the site. And so whatever the solution was going to be was going to need some type of power. That estimate came back significantly higher than what we were expecting to get power to the site. That in turn led us to revise our design and to do some value engineering and to make it ultimately the irrigation and storage system less costly. So there's a sort of a second iteration of design work that was done. What's not on here is that between February and August, the project was originally put out to bid. The first time, the bids that did come back, the first time was put out to bid, came back significantly higher than what our estimate was from our consultant. And so the recommendation back in July of this year was, instead of trying to do something at that cost working on the project, is to try to rebid it. So that's what we did. And so the project went out to bid a second time in August of this year. And so when we get to the next slide, you're looking at the bid line item. That's basically where the $208,500 comes from. Is the work that's required inside that bid to create the irrigation water system. If you go back to the previous slide, I think there's just one more thing I want to call out on that before we get into the financials, which is, really what's left to do. So the bid that has come back was actually relatively close to our estimate, albeit a little bit above. If we do have funding for the project, this project is effectively ready to go. I've been talking to the operation manager of the firm that we'd be engaged with to do this project. They're ready to get started as soon as possible. So that work will start literally next month, the next few weeks. We were expecting at some point to get electrical on site. It's Eversource. We're at the mercy of the utility there. However, the update I can tell you on that is in the past 2 weeks, we now have utility poles on site. The Eversource installed 3 utility poles over the past couple of weeks, and there was a utility pole that Verizon owns at the street level that also needs to be replaced to accommodate the amount of power that we need to bring to the site for the system. The timeline, if we get going on the project, if we break ground next month, is to have it completed this spring. And we expect the power to be connected to the site when Eversource is ready to do so. So that's kind of the timeline in terms of what the steps are up to completion. The next slide shows the financials of the project so far. So if you look at the far left column, we're looking at the overall project expenditures to date. So most of the spends under that heading has been straight from the ARPA funds that were allocated to this project. A total of $350,000 of ARPA funds has been allocated to this project to date. You can see, I'm not going to go through each line item by line item.
I'm going to admit someone else was in the remaining room. You can continue to.
I can sign on, and if you make
Yeah,
me
if
a
you could
co,
do that,
why don't I do that?
Yeah. Go ahead when you're ready.
I'm just looking. Do you want to
No, please continue.
Okay.
go ahead?
So if you look at that total, the 242.8, that leaves roughly 107.2 ARPA funds left. We did carve out a portion of our operating budget in the last fiscal year to help pay for the Eversource invoice, which is part of the work that's already done to bring the utility poles onto the site and ultimately a transformer and power into the site. In the middle column, you have the remaining project expenses. There's on-site electrician work that needs to be done. The main line item there is the bid that came back, the second time it came back from bid this fall, just the $208,500. Irrigation consulting shows up on both that left column and the center column. That's because that is the firm, the consultant, the engineer that we have retained on this project. You can see what we've spent to date, but on the left-hand side, you can see what's remaining in the middle. And then finally, once the system is operational and commissioned, in order to take advantage of the irrigation and to water the facility, the solution that we have is to use 2 water reel travelers. They're self-retracting. They would connect to various ports that would be installed during the construction process. They would water overnight and self-retract to be reused the following day or whenever you look to water next. So if you look at what is remaining for project expenses, that total is $291,800. If you add up A, B, and C, which is our expenditures to date, the remaining project expenses, and what we spent from our operating fiscal 25 year budget. It gives you the overall project costs. Finally, in the last column for funding sources proposed, there's exhausting the remaining ARPA funds, carving out again another $40,000 from our operating budget for this fiscal year, identifying $12,000 from a source in fiscal year 27. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then why we're here tonight is to ask for the support from advisory to lift the revolving fund limit to spend an additional $132,600 out of our revolving fund to bring this project to completion. The $12,000 that is shown as TBD, that's half or one of the 2 water wheel travelers that we utilize with the system. The system is designed optimally to use between 2 to 3 water travelers. There's no requirement out of the gate, certainly this spring, to have 2 of them immediately. We can start with 1 and then add 1 downstream. Of the 2 seasons, our springs have historically been wetter anyway. We certainly want to have 1 at the outset. We're commissioning the system, make sure everything's functioning and working properly. And then, we can certainly add 1 later as we get into the next fiscal year. And so that's a high-level review of the financial surrounding the project to date.
So what I'd like to do is open up the questions to the members of the advisory committee. And then I'd like to open up I'd like to make available questions from the members of the audience. And then we'll come back to the advisory committee. So your ask at the moment, if I'm interpreting this correctly, is you'd like to increase the revolving fund by $132,600. Is that what you're asking from this committee?
That's correct. A one-time increase in revolving fund limit for this fiscal year for the amount.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I have a clarifying question.
Please.
So regarding the size of the revolving fund, my understanding is at town meeting last year, town meeting approved $250,000 for recreation revolving fund, right?
It's 150.
It was 1.
It was 150?
Yes.
My note said it was 250.
150.
Okay, right.
Mhm.
The warrant I looked up last night said 250.
That may have been an older version, but at town meeting was voted, it was 150 from the operating and 150 from revolving.
Okay.
That's correct.
Then what's the increase asked for tonight? Something more than 150?
Yes, the additional 132,600.
Okay, thanks.
Others? Okay, so I have a few questions. Who is the project manager on this installation? Who takes the responsibility for seeing it from inception to completion?
I'd say for right now, it's been a bit of a moving target. I think initially, when the project started back in 2022, it was the prior Recreation Commission chair that initially spearheaded it. And when he left in February, I've, in my opinion, de facto have served in that role.
February of what year?
This year. So I've been doing everything associated from a project management standpoint since that point in time. The contract that we have, so that's on the town side, the town of Sherborn. I would serve as the project manager. From a construction administration standpoint, if it got underway, it would be the consultant from irrigation consulting and their expertise.
And what town employee supervises the consultant?
In terms of,
Monitoring their activity.
so to date, that, of course, or since I've taken over the project, that would be me. And anytime that there is an expense as it relates to work that's done on the project, It goes through approval through the Recreation Commission, and it's approved by the chair of the Recreation Commission.
So just to restate, I think what I'm hearing is that from the outset of 2022, an elected official, the Rec Commission was the project manager, and when he left in February, it fell to you.
Right.
And you're saying that it's now going to be the consultant.
No,
The consultant's going to drive it, but you're going to be the one supervising the consultant?
no. What I'm saying is I remain the project manager. If we go into the construction phase, additionally, from a construction administration standpoint, as part of the professional services that are going to be tied to this project, the construction administration will be done by the consultant, which would be assisting us. So in other words, if there's a bill that comes in to cover the cost of materials, whether it be the piping for the conduit or the system to power or whatever, we'd be relying on the construction administrators to validate and make sure that these are to spec as they are defined in the IFB, so that when we go to pay the bills, there's been a validation of both the materials and the work is being done properly. And so from a project management standpoint, I do that on behalf of the town. However, from a construction administration standpoint, we're relying on the services of the consultant.
Thank you. Do you have any knowledge about the original proposal of 350 and how that was determined?
Do I have knowledge about how we got to the select board determining to support the projects with $350,000?
No, more about there probably was some kind of ask to allocate 350,000
Correct.
to complete the project.
Correct.
Do you have any knowledge about how that 350,000 amount was determined to complete the project? Was there a written proposal, bidding? How did that number come about?
My understanding for the $350,000 was based on, at the time, what they expected the project to cost to have it completed based on the information that was available at that time.
And who was they?
It'd be a combination of the project manager at that time, the consultant, primarily those two working together to provide the town with the information of what it was going to cost.
Are we still using that? Are we still using that consultant?
Yes, we are, same consultant.
And I guess my observation also, pardon me?
Oh, I was just gonna add on to that. So when we received the ARPA money, this was like, the select board decided this was a good thing to use the ARPA money on. So the recreation chair at the time, I think, just kind of ballparked the 350. But then that's why if you look at any ARPA reports, it started initially at 160,000, like, let's see if we can do this. And then they got to a point where like, oh, well, it looks like we can do it. They gave them another $90,000. Then they gave them the follow. Yeah. So it was kind of, it wasn't the 350 ask was, okay, this is it. It was kind of in steps.
Thank you for that clarification. Included, you made mention that of the 150,000 that the town funds through its annual expenditure allocation to recreation, 40,000 was spent on the Eversource of the total 91,000 that was due. So 40 came from the operating fund, 51 came from the ARPA money.
Correct.
Okay? The 40,000, I assume, was never contemplated to be used from the operating funds. So when the Rec Commission came to advisory and to the town to ask for 150,000 for an expenditure, it must have had a vision as to what that was going to be spent on. Markings of the fields, maintenance of the fields. So I guess I'm just making the point that I'm not quite clear why 40,000 was spent on Eversource for a capital project as opposed to an operating fund. So that's another ask, is that you want to spend another 40 from the operating account, from the operating funds. Though I think that when town meeting approves this type of thing, they're not thinking that it's going to be put towards a capital project. It's going to be put towards maintenance and repair of the facility. So we'll take that up at another
May I
time.
make a comment on that point?
Sure.
So both for the prior fiscal year and this fiscal year, my understanding is, based on the conversations with the Recreation Commission and the Recreation Commissioners have had, was that we were in this position seemingly over the way the last couple of years have gone, where we're putting tens of thousands of dollars in materials into the fields. The purpose of the operating was to provide on an annual basis money to have better playing surfaces ultimately. And the discussion at the Recreation Commission level was we had multiple times we're putting down tens of thousands of dollars of organic fertilizer, seed, grass seed, things of that nature, yet without an irrigation system that was at times being wasted. And so if you go back as early as last fall, for example, when we're spending money and putting organic fertilizer, which is expensive, but we do because we have well water in town, and there's actually some benefits to using organic fertilizer beyond that. And then you look at the overseeding that we do to help strengthen and maintain your playing surfaces for athletic use. The decision was made to cut back on those expenditures because a lot of it was being wasted in the absence of irrigation. And in the opinion of the Recreation Commission, right or wrong, was that it's a better use of the money ultimately to get to an irrigation so that when you are putting these expensive materials down, they can actually grow. And so philosophically, the Recreation Commission felt, and when they spent the money last year and when they recommended it for this year, is that was a means to an end to have a better playing surface than throwing money away on something that you couldn't properly grow.
How is the complex currently irrigated? Just from rainwater? And what about the other complexes, Jameson and Fessenden? Are they irrigated or? No, so those have no automated irrigation systems. What's the condition of those fields?
So Fessenden's soil composition has sort of the opposite problem. It is a heavy clay ratio or content, and so it retains its water a little too well. And so it tends to actually handle droughts a little bit better because of that. Jameson is like Laurel in that when we get to near drought or drought conditions, it suffers. And the parts that are closest to the shade and stuff like that feel okay, but anywhere out in the open gets pretty much wiped out, and you're in the position of having it almost regrow or wait for it to recover. So I would say the difference between Laurel and Fessenden is a soil composition difference. I'd say Jameson, which has baseball diamonds, which are utilized significantly less often than Laurel, has a very similar challenge.
Can I ask a question? And realize I'm coming in later on all this stuff. You said there's power that's gonna go there now. There are already utility poles up. Is there already power connected, or this will then allow power to the site?
So I believe we've, Sean, you correct me if I'm wrong on this. I believe the 90,000 will bring the power in, but the additional electrician line item will connect it to whatever source brings in, is that correct?
Correct, the combination of the 90 that was already spent, or 91, plus it's up there on the previous slide.
40 something.
The conduits will get power to a point, and then what would bid, the construction takes it the rest of the way, to the wells, to the pumps and tanks on the system.
Is this power that can be used for other uses on the field? Does this enhance anything? Have we looked at
Great question.
that?
Absolutely. Sure.
Electric mowers, lights, if we ever have those someday. Probably not car chargers, because we lock the field, so we'll probably never get an Eversource grant for that.
Sorry, okay.
So the 91,000 was paid in advance for them to complete the work. There's no balance due Eversource.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
And to put that in comparison, we put a transformer, ground mount transformer, larger than that one, in front of the library, and had to pay for a utility pole to get replaced on Sanger Street, which we shouldn't have to pay for, but we did. And the utility work all the way up Sanger Street to accommodate the new library, we paid $20,000. So there was no way to anticipate that somehow Eversource's escalation was gonna be $91,000 for the 3 wooden poles and some overground wires and a transformer.
That cost is
But
fixed
there
now.
it is, and you can't pre-engineer that, you can't go out ahead of the game and get that number until you've paid for the engineering, you've designed the system to anticipate that. So we didn't anticipate the $91,000, much less than that in the original budget.
Adam, continue if you want.
No, but that's the all-in cost. You said it's sort of prepaid, so that price is locked.
To the utility companies, yeah, correct.
Okay.
The bid of 208,500 for the irrigation system storage combination, when does that bid expire?
My understanding is that we have 30 days to take action on it, and is it 60 or 90 to sign a contract? I think it's dictated by the terms of the IFP. We're still within that period. So, but it'd be within the next 30 days, most likely.
So you believe it expires November 15th?
So the bid came in on September, maybe the third, fourth week of September, would be the around roughly that time frame. September 26th. I think.
I was a little bit confused about this water reel travelers. You have in here quantity of 2 for 24. And then you have the defer purchase a second water reel traveler for 12. So what is it that's in the middle column? Is it that I'm not, the budget, this total of 574 includes 36,000 for water reel travelers.
24,000 for water reel travelers.
Well, what's the double asterisk of 12K in the right side? I'm not quite sure why that is to purchase what you're calling the second water reel traveler.
So the remaining project expenses includes the, let me go back to what, so the system is designed to optimally use between 2 to 3 water travelers. So it comes up to be, 2 point something water travelers. So if you want to fully maximize the system, you could have 3 water travelers. 2 would, be sufficient certainly. What we're showing is the plan is to have at least 2. But for the purposes of spend, in this fiscal year, we only plan on purchasing 1. And that's why the other 12,000 is shown as fiscal year 27. Theoretically.
So you'll be asking for funding for that, to cover that second purchase? Because you really don't need the 132, you need 120 if you're not going to buy that second item.
The 132 is not inclusive of that. That's, so in other words, if you look at the total of the remaining project expenses, it's 291.8. It includes,
Which includes 2 water reels.
right, and if you look at the funding sources proposed, the assumption is within the funds requested today that we buy 1 water reel and defer purchase to a future date.
I'm still confused, I'm sorry.
Am I answering this question poorly?
Well, I don't know but it appears to me that there are 3 up there. 2 that are part of the 291 and then a third. And I understand that we could use 3, but we're only buying 2.
Yeah,
But
maybe that might be the waters. Both columns total 291.
I see that. I just don't understand how you got it.
Embedded within the third column is an amount for a water reel. What I was trying to do was trying to keep apples to apples, and I guess it's muddying the waters, but there's only a plan to purchase 1 now and spend $12,000 at a future date from a future source.
Right.
Of $12,000. And so all the other spend outside of that $12,000 includes 1 water reel.
Okay, got it. So you'll be coming back to ask for 12 from someplace, whether it be the revolving fund, part of the 150 that's allocated, or the source.
Well, it won't be back yet.
Oh, it wouldn't be here, it would be
You'll use the money from one of the allocations.
correct
Right,
in a future
okay.
year.
Yep, got
That
it.
is correct, you're right.
Okay, okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm still confused. Would we end up with 3 at that point? Because,
2.
okay, then I just don't know why, I just don't understand why there's
It's-
2 on the middle and 1 on third, and then numbers is still 291.
It's unfunded. There's 12,000 of unfunded amount there.
Okay.
Correct. When I laid out the remaining project expenses, I wanted to lay it out as the system was designed.
Um,
Can I ask a question about the system, irrigation system? Someone was saying that there's one that's used to water fields, the playing fields or something, the ball fields. Is this a system that anyone here has used or the town has used before and is familiar with?
So there's no, to my knowledge, there's no irrigation system.
Maybe I misheard. So there are no irrigation systems.
Not on the
This
recreation
would be-
facility.
This would be a.
I think it's just on the rotary, is it? Is it an irrigation system?
What?
Does the rotary have irrigation? Oh.
Yes, it does.
It's
I
a
saw it.
sprinkler.
I was just wondering, is this a?
Don't tell the EB.
Is this an automated system? Is this manual? Does somebody need, is someone turning it off when we're getting a lot of rain? Like who actually will be running this?
Correct, so there'll be an operation plan, which will dictate how the system is used. My understanding is as part of, one of the requirements of the Board of Health is asking for is an operating plan. Part of that is going to be developed by our consultant, it'll be incumbent upon the Recreation Department to execute that operating plan. It would not be used, so if you take the most recent spring where we had like 8 inches of rain in the month of May, you would not be deploying, you wouldn't waste man hours to deploy your water reel traveler nor waste the water, during periods like that. If you had an overnight rain that dropped an inch of water, like we're expecting tomorrow night into Friday, again, another situation where, you wouldn't use it. The idea for us, for the Recreation Department, is to use it tactically, which is to help promote during periods where we go into extended periods where there's not natural rain, which would be mainly during the summer and fall seasons. Spring, generally speaking, between winter melt and precipitation, historically in New England, and most recently, we had the grass grows fine. Sean can attest to that. But all that said, my understanding with the irrigation system is that you don't want to be watering. It's not a golf course. You don't necessarily want to be watering every day. You want to be watering areas every 2 to 3 days. You want to promote deep root growth. That's what helps you create more drought resistant and better playing surface long-term. And so that's, we would follow the operating plan that's developed in conjunction with their irrigation consultant, as well as what the Board of Health ultimately, I believe, is going to review and approve.
Got it. I think I understand now the water reel travelers. So this is like a big manual thing that gets set up to water the whole field.
So
versus things popping up. Like
correct. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Nora?
On that note, just to keep on track with that, are you gonna be doing it, or is DPW gonna be, like, who's, you individually, or who
I think
goes
it
out?
depends. So like tonight, as it stands today, I'm at the facility every night anyway. I walk it up every night. And so, like right now, we implemented a program this fall. We have portable battery powered lights. We actually have, for the first time, have teams training at night down low. So I go down there anyway at night to put those lights away and to lock up the facility. And then we reopen it, the next afternoon. And so if you look at when the timing of these water reel travelers would be utilized, which would be in the early morning hours, going towards the morning. Once all your athletes and participants are off the field, you put it out into a position. As it's watering, it's self-retracting. And so I guess it'd probably be me in most cases, but Sean's crew helps us with quite a bit with recreation stuff. I guess it would depend on what's going on that particular day, what other activities. They do mowing and field lining on behalf of recreation. So I think there'd be some coordination, but it would make sense to me at least that if I'm already there doing everything else at night, that would just be one more thing to put a reel in place for it to water overnight.
All right, can I ask another question regarding that? When you mentioned just lights and everything, are we gonna be generating more income?
We are
On that-
generating more income. We're
Can you-
already generating more income. It's a bit of a, it's not gonna show up that great this season, in part because we started with the lighting program so late, for two reasons. One is that the lights are excellent, they work great, they were well researched, and they're performing well, but they came from the UK. They got held up in customs for months. I won't get to the reasons why, but it's an unfortunate fact of the matter. They were in customs for quite a bit of time. The other thing that we had that impacted our income this fall is we had to shut our fields down early every night because of the West Nile virus and the health advisory. And so in this particular season, it's going to look like at the end, from a revenue standpoint, like a typical fall, but it was anything but typical. We lost a bit of revenue on the West Nile virus side. We actually gained a fair amount of revenue from the ability to allow teams to train at night.
And not to hammer it in, I'm just, do they invoice it, do they go out in the beginning of the season and then they get rectified, or do you send them out at the end of the season so that the West Nile
Yeah,
virus?
so what we did in the spring really well, was a change from the way we'd done it previously, was we got our invoices out right at the gate. And then we made adjustments. We had a lot of rain, we had a lot of closures. I think we started the season off with like $70-something thousand in invoices by the end. So, it was down to the 50s because of all the closures due to rain and fields being unavailable throughout the season. This season was a bit different in terms of the invoices have been invoiced, and they are going to be due on November 30th. But it was later getting out for the simple reason that the initial schedule got completely wiped out by West Nile virus and the delay in lighting. And so it was a combination of sort of spring and, best laid plans kind of fell by the wayside, but everyone's been invoiced now.
Okay, and then can I ask her?
If is it related to the project?
Yes,
Please continue.
thank you. Actually, if you want to finish your questions, I just want to go back to the historical part of it, but go ahead.
No, go ahead, we'll put it in context.
I'm looking here, I just want to break it down very basic. So going back to the previous slide, I think I can do this because I think I'm now, no, I can't. Can you go back to the previous slide with the timeline, please?
Yep.
Thank you. So when it was started, the project initiation was August of 2022. The ARPA money, how much, there was ARPA money that was dedicated to it, just kind of without really any consultant. It was just that 100 and some odd dollars. I just want to get this down. So the select board, because this is before my time too, so so that ARPA money, it was just that number was picked. Was it the 60,000? How much was it? 160. And the select board voted on that rather than other capital projects. This was kind of a new project that
It
people-
stems from the town meeting vote not to do the turf fields. At that time, I think that was in 1821, when they voted down the turf fields. So the select board was like, you know what, they voted down the turf fields, we're gonna invest in the grass fields. And that's when the operating budget went from 15,000 to 150,000, because they said, we're gonna invest in fertilizer, so we're gonna make these fields better. Our community needs better fields.
So that,
So that
Okay.
all ties in at the same time when the select board said, yeah, we're gonna move ahead with this. We don't know what's gonna cost, we don't know if we're gonna even be able to do it, but we're gonna try.
and that didn't come up before advisory at all, or did it? Must have.
ARPA money did not.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to, so it never came before advisory. So 160, the select board voted to put this for this project rather than town project, like regular things like streets and whatnot. So that was that 160 that we didn't even have an idea on. So then that really, now we are here today with what's the total amount now that it is? We're looking at 5?
Well, I mean, from ARPA, the earmark was 350.
Okay, so 350 then came in from ARPA
Correct.
for the whole project at that.
That's how
August.
much money was allocated from ARPA for this project.
And that's what the select board voted on.
Correct.
Okay. And now it's at over 5.
The total project cost is at 574.
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay. That's all. I just wanted to clarify that. So it didn't really go before anybody, it just ended up
Well,
morphing into this.
Well, fiscal '23 was 100,000 that was allocated by select board. Fiscal '24 was another 60,000, and
So
fiscal
it's going up.
'25 was 190. So that gets us to the 350.
That kind of, thank you. That even clarifies it more. Thank you.
Okay. What does Carolyn Cooney's company provide?
So Carolyn Cooney's, what they're providing is professional services as it relates to the tennis court project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And you mentioned the Board of Health. What is the status of the regulatory permitting?
I think, if I understand correctly, we're waiting to get power to the site to do the next testing that they would like to see from this project. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the Board of Health, Sherborn Board of Health doesn't have a specific regulation carved out for irrigation wells. So they're basically treating them as 2 residential wells. Well, outside of that, what we needed to prove was the actual yield, not a 4-hour test like you do for your home. So once we finally got the pumps in, which we did in August, obviously we still didn't have power to the site. We still don't. We had it on site. We had a generator brought in, which came at a lot of work because it's a 3-phase system. So we had a generator put in so that we could run the pumps for 48 hours, not just for the Board of Health, to prove engineering-wise that the yield was sufficient and was going to hold at what it was, as well as get quality tests. Because it's no secret that those wells are the closest wells to the cap landfill. So we needed to make sure we weren't pulling contaminants from the landfill. So we did that at a pretty high cost for the testing. That doesn't exactly fit inside the box for the Board of Health, but we're not going to offer more testing until we have the system, because it came with a lot of expense to do that. Once the system's built, we'll go back and do the 4-hour test that would normally be done. And if they want a 48-hour test, they can have as many, there won't be really a cost to doing the test once the system's built, because you'll be on regular power, grid power rather than generators. So that's kind of where that's at. We know what the yield is going to be because we already did it. So that'll come to fall. We conveyed that back in either late August or September to them.
Does the Board of Health need to issue you any permits or what?
Not to contract the system, no.
So the system could be used without a Board of Health approval? Or we're unclear about that?
No, they'll need to sign off on the wells.
And
Okay.
we also want to sign off or at least review the operating plan.
Right.
On that note, may I ask a question?
Please.
What were the test results? Not the quantity, but the quality?
Quality was clean.
Okay.
As anyone would expect, the only VOC that came up was Colony.
Colony.
Every time on a well in Sherborn. And Sherborn's limited 0, so that was the only VOC. And of course, we know very well what chemicals we test every year at the Cap landfill. So we knew exactly what to test for.
And you can explain VOCs are volatile organic compounds? Thank you.
Has this request been voted on and approved by the Rec Commission?
Yes.
Okay. By just noting, there are no minutes that have been posted to the town's website for the Rec Commission.
There actually has been minutes.
I checked today, there's no minutes available for the Rec Commission.
Let me correct that. There are minutes. There have been minutes posted. We do have more minutes to post.
Well, before we leave tonight, we can go to the town's website and see that there are no minutes posted. So maybe you just need to submit them and they just haven't been posted yet. Okay.
Do you record them on Zoom?
We are one of the committees that are not required to record. We could record them, but we're not recording them right now.
Okay. Laura has a question.
Sure, please.
It seems that if we started with 350,000 allocation and now we're at 594, there were some unanticipated expenses, and you mentioned the electric cost being one of them for Eversource. Are there any other, when I look at this, is the potential for any other unanticipated expenses in terms of what's left to be done? Anything that you worry about?
I don't, geez, yeah. I don't believe so. Take them, before the project went out to bid, those costs were, confirmed or checked, ones that were outside the bid. Within the bid itself, unless the scope changes, which the town would have to sign off on, that should not change. Irrigation consulting, which is professional services, is broken down into 6 different phases for this project. I think 4 or 5 of the phases have been complete. Basically, the remaining phase is the construction itself. For the prior 5 phases over the last 3 years, they've come in at or below budget on what they have estimated for their work, what it's going to cost. Obviously, from a practical matter, any of the significant work that needs to be done subsurface, in terms of depth, like more than a few feet, which is mainly what's left is a lot of trenching, has already been completed. So there shouldn't be any significant surprises. Certainly nothing that really came up during the drilling process. Can you think of anything, Sean, that would
Well,
escalate?
I mean, the biggest risk would have been prior to bidding. Now the biggest risk you could see from them is if they hit an Indian burial ground in the middle of the field. I mean, they're bound to that price. You have unforeseen circumstances. They're not gonna hit ledge, we know that. We've done geotechnical out there. So that is a pretty firm price. It would be hard to see how that would come off of that mark. Eversource is what it is. They're contracted to do what they gotta do.
But they're already paid, right? So they're not gonna charge you more.
They're not coming back for more.
And so just so I understand, I'm picturing these water reels, traveler things, and then it says irrigation system storage. Is that $208,000 really all storage, or is there some other water spouting part of this that is part of the irrigation system?
Well, it's storage and pumps and lines underground from the wells to the storage.
But the pumps have already been installed, right?
The well pumps have been installed. So they feed water to these big tanks that are gonna sit off to the side.
So the
Then there's
208
pumps
is
that
really,
pump from that tank.
okay, so you still have the pumps that pump from the tank and the actual tank. That's essentially what that 208.
Right,
That's
and then
the-
some irrigation lines that are underground, because the travelers he spoke of are above ground, but obviously you gotta get the water to the field.
Okay, so you still have to install that part too,
As
trench
part of
that
that
part,
contract,
okay.
correct. And electric. If you picture Laurel, it's not like, it's big. So there's electric that's going halfway across the site to get to the well pumps, to where the storage pumps are. That's all part of that contract.
Is there any chance all this gets installed and then Eversource doesn't come out for a year?
A year?
Yeah. I mean,
Well, it
is that-
took 2 years to hook up an electric charger. We have made pretty good strides faster than I thought we would have to get the poles in. And there's always an issue between Eversource and Verizon. Verizon somehow showed up miraculously and stuck a pole out on North Main that I didn't expect for another 6 months. There is a potential to that, but we can't. That usually comes after Jamaica gets hit by a Category 5 hurricane. You can't really predict the stuff, but you can kind of see what's gonna happen.
So this might not be in use next year.
We can still get a hurricane here.
Well, that's an important point about timing of making a decision.
But that doesn't change the fact that we either sign a contract for the construction that we put out to bid or we don't.
No, I understand, but there's a process to talk about too.
Well, there is, but there isn't. The ARPA money's gonna go away too, so.
That's the key.
What happens on the back end of getting this thing up and operational is different than what you have to decide tonight.
Right. The ARPA money has to be allocated or spent by December 31st.
Well, it needs to be allocated.
It's already allocated. It can't be
Yeah.
unallocated. It
Okay,
has to
right.
be by
And has to be spent by when?
December of 2026.
Okay, right, so there's another 15 months, right, okay.
Do you think you bid it in a year and the price would come down?
Right now, we're trying to ask some questions and,
I know, and I have
Okay.
to.
thank you.
I was just wondering, so you spend the ARPA funds now, you basically can install the entire system. If Eversource is the holdup, they would come at the end to run the electrical cables and the interconnect stuff, and the field would be usable, obviously.
Correct, the field will get back in shape, and we already kind of went through the logistics of basically bringing a generator back to allow the contractor to be able to, start the system up and prove it out so that we wouldn't have to hold back 20% or whatever, If they finish the system in December, we're not gonna run the system, but if they finish it next spring and Eversource falls flat on their face, despite the leverage we have to try to push them, at some point, we'll be able to put a generator on the system, run the system for the sake of clearing the contractor out. Be it done, and it'll, be a completed system without the Eversource piece. It's kind of, that's not on that contractor, that's on us and Eversource.
Is the generator expensive?
What's that?
Is the generator run thing
The
expensive?
generator we're actually able to get out of NERAC, which is a cache that we have for kind of emergency municipal services. The hooking up, comes with some work. Again, that would be in an instance where, something would have to happen between now and then. And that's happened before. We were trying to get transformers and generators here when Haiti happened, and literally the entire East Coast ran out of transformers and everything else. That could happen. That may happen actually next week. We don't know. But if the infrastructure can't be installed, we have a way to at least have the system built and done. And again, that minimizes the risk from everyone because we can clear out the contract and we'll just wait on hot water.
I just thought of something. So you said you have battery lights, but are you aiming for other lights, electric lights too?
Not necessarily. Right now, just to give you a bit of a comparison. So we worked on a project earlier this spring to put up lights at Jameson Field that was donated to the town. And these were called stadium lights, I suppose. That project, which was funded entirely by donations from Dover Sherborn Youth Baseball Softball, was nearly a $250,000 light project. And for the most part, the utilization of that field was entirely by Dover Sherborn Baseball Softball. So we are making revenue really off of those lights. It comes with a 30-year warranty, end-to-end, coverage on maintenance. And they're LED, so it wasn't a tremendous expense in terms of consumption. The difference with the lights that we're using right now down at Laurel are that they're relatively inexpensive, but they generate a lot of revenue.
Mhm.
So the ROI on them, if they're used consistently, season over season, is 1 to 2 seasons, and then you basically have the asset paid for. So I don't necessarily see, at least sitting here today, a case to put up permanent lights that are, it's a different sport, it has different requirements, soccer, versus playing a baseball game under lights. But I don't really see, considering you can make a fair amount of revenue with the portable lights, why you'd want to go through a capital project that expensive, in effect, bringing this amount of revenue, just at a higher cost.
Let's, if you don't mind, let's move back to this request. Have you thought about what the annual budget is to maintain the system once it's active?
So the question that we asked the consultant was, what are the setup, season starting and season ending procedures, whether or not towns do that, municipalities and towns do that on their own, or is that something that they farm out? And so this particular system is actually less costly to maintain and is less complicated than a completely automated in-ground irrigation system with the pop-up sprinkler heads all over the place and that type of thing. So if you're doing those things, so the DPW is doing it, it would be the man hours required to do that, and whatever components that break or need to be replaced. If you were going to pay someone to do that, it would be thousands of dollars a year, but it wouldn't be tens of thousands of dollars a year. There would be a service cost to it.
So the annual costs are electricity, utility to operate it, and winterization, and whatever is done in the springtime.
Correct.
And whatever breaks during the course of a season.
Yeah, that's not carried in the public works budget currently.
Right. So it's incremental cost to the town. Right, okay.
Can I piggyback on that?
Please.
Just, there's also, the water wheels are deployed manually. So somebody has to put them out every time they want water. Is that correct?
Correct. So it's, you would put them into position.
And they retract.
They're on a timer. They retract automatically as it's watering the field.
Right. So there's the labor to do that. Whenever, any day you want water, somebody's got to do that work. Has that been figured into the plan? The ongoing cost of that, or the question of who will be doing that?
So a similar question came up earlier, asking about that, and the way I responded to it then is that I'm already there at night, every night, closing the facility. As it is right now, I'm there not only closing and locking the facility, but I'm also putting away the battery powered lights that we're using for training, to allow teams to train at night. So in my mind, it would just be, I'm already there anyway. It would just be one more thing to do before I leave. It wouldn't be a separate trip out just to do that. So if it took an extra 5 or 10 minutes, I don't think it's going to be a significant.
So that's in your job description then, you would say?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it was ultimately the responsibility to fall upon me. I
Yeah,
don't think it's significantly changing the amount of time I'm spending at the facility.
okay.
Sean?
A slightly different take on that. Remember, it's not a total wash. I mean, we don't have an irrigation system. We have terrible fields right now. The DPW, once if not twice a year, puts down thousands of dollars worth of seed at a great cost and quite a bit of labor on those fields. Last year, we did it in mid-September, trying to wait out the drought, and it didn't rain for 45 days after we put the seed down. We could have just burned the bags of seed if we wanted to. Would have been the same result. And it was probably about $10,000 worth of seed and labor. Correct. Might have been more than that if you include the labor. Real sad. So that, there's a lot of waste there. You're trying to fertilize dead grass. You're trying to push something that doesn't want to stay alive when you hit a drought. So it's not exactly a wash in it all. There's some cost to operating, but we're just throwing money away sometimes at the whim of what Mother Nature's going to do to us.
Do you aerate?
The system is designed to help us recover from that.
Do you aerate the fields?
So
Do you have
aerating dust
do you have a third party do that, or you have the equipment?
that field, we do it. The third party does Pheasant, because it needs to be deep tine aerated and
Right.
sanded.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll get there someday. We don't have the same equipment. But that field down there is like aerated concrete, so we have an aerator tractor that can do it.
Well, right. In order to make the roots work, you're going to need to poke some holes in it.
Right.
Yeah. Just a couple of other questions, if I could. I imagine that the Rec Commission has other capital projects in mind. So when I guess I look at this, it's always a compared to what? So what other things could be done with this $126,000, $132,000 that won't be getting done as a result? Or will need alternative sources of financing?
So we have a long-term capital budget plan that has future anticipated capital budget needs that are on it. I suppose this could be a source of funds in lieu of capital budget ask, potentially downstream for that. I would say from a priority standpoint, priority or timing standpoint, when you look at where the majority, more than half of our revenue comes from, it comes from this facility. And so it's also the most utilized facility by all the teams in town. And so I think you could certainly spend the money elsewhere if you didn't do this. but this is where you're gonna get your biggest bang for the buck in terms of number of people, athletes, teams, activity. This is where we look at the source of money that's in the revolving fund. This is where a lot of money comes from. It's from local.
When was the last time you had a rate adjustment to the rental fees?
So we raised the rates for the Laurel and Fessenden in 2024.
Okay, so we maybe
For the
do.
past 2 years.
Okay, Jeremy?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, there is a 5-year look-ahead capital plan that's updated every year. The only other project I'm aware of that the Recreation Commission has are some pavilions and a storage shed at Laurel Field. Currently in the plan for about $150,000, but there are no other projects identified 5 years out from now.
Okay, thank you. And do you have a projection of what the revolving fund balance will be if this 132 is spent from that fund?
So the revolving fund balance, I did, for the purposes of the Recreation Commission to review the project, I did a pro forma for the rest of this year, of this fiscal year, so that they could see what the impacts would be. We are at a point in the revolving fund cycle. So we go through periods of time where there's more money coming in than going out, and then we have periods of time where there's more money going out than coming in. Net things are going well, and it should be gradually increasing, over time. There's going to be significant ups and downs below that. We're entering a period of time where there's going to be more money coming in than going out. So if you were to look at our year-to-date spend on the revolving fund, which is front-end loaded, because we pay for most of our summer programs, which are heavily utilized, and so we've already had a lot of outflow from the revolving fund. I think year to date we've already spent over 150 limit, it's around 90 something thousand.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is from our summer programming. However, as we look for the rest of this fiscal year, we start collecting for the summer programming in the winter, around mid to late February into early March to get ready for the following summer. So from a cash flow standpoint, if you want to think of it that way, we're in an excellent position to absorb this cost.
Jeremy?
Yeah, when you look at about the past 5 years on average, the revenue that comes in, it's about $160,000 per year. I think that was sort of the basis when the recommendation was to set the revolving fund limit at $150,000 per year. That was approved at last town meeting. It considered that average revenue to expenses.
I guess where I was headed was the revolving fund historically has a balance of X at June 30 of each year. Will this cause that balance to drop significantly from historical balances?
Do you have an answer?
Oh, what they should have been had billings been done.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the tricky
Right,
part, because if I
right.
look at what the actual balance at the end of the years were, it's like, it was 113, then 128, then 141, 106. But at the end of fiscal 25, it was 275.
Right.
And now we're at 242.
Okay, so the average balance probably should have been about 125, be my guess. And that would be the target, not to let it drop below 125.
However, didn't you get switched from operating to revolving for pay? I'm just, because that's factored in too, right?
So in terms of my compensation?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm paid out of revolving now.
So, right, because so that's something else to factor in, that
Yeah, there's
people
two
are-
sources of funding for the Recreation Commission. There is general fund, a general fund budget, $150,000 that started just a handful of years ago,
Like 23.
FY '23. Prior to that, it had all been funded out of the revolving fund. That year, that one deals with the artificial turf discussion, wanting to maintain those fields, the rural fields in a better shape. So that budget started at that point. So currently there are two funding sources, $150,000 from the general fund budget and a spending limit of $150,000 from the revolving fund.
So that's kind of wonky too, like to get a real accurate picture of revolving, it's kind of hard, I think even now, really.
Yeah, that's why, given, that was important, when I did the pro forma for the Recreation Commission showing what we're looking at for spend, within the 150 and revolving for the rest of the year, it's, we're right within $5,000, that's including my compensation. So you look at what we have left to spend money on.
I have three last questions, thankfully. One is kind of a technical question. You went out to bid for the system and the storage tanks. Was there a requirement that the funding be available before the bid be issued?
Now, the funding needs to be in hand prior to executing the construction contract.
Okay.
We can bid, and it's actually generally good practice to bid ahead of time. And if we have the opportunity to bid, say, prior to town meeting, to actually have a bid number, request a capital expenditure, that's a no number. So we can bid without funding.
But you can't execute the contract.
Correct.
Okay.
So there's been no contract executed.
Right.
There's
Okay.
an apparent low bid of slightly over $200,000.
Yeah. How many did you get back?
What's that?
How many responses did you get back?
There were 2 responses.
I wonder why it was such a low response rate. And what was the other bid?
Significantly higher.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Okay. Set my second of third last questions. What project and financing options have you considered? What are the alternatives? We've heard a well thought out proposal. What are the alternatives to the proposal that you've made?
I don't have to the time the complete history of the project, but my understanding is that throughout this process, they have looked at different ways, starting back when they were looking at the overburden wells being a potential solution. They've had a consultant, they brought in a hydrologist, and the experts, I feel like, have kicked this thing around professionally, which we were leaning on as a town for the past few years, as each turn in the project in terms of, maybe I'm not answering your question, but the yields from the wells in terms of treatments of the wells, trying to increase the yield of the well, changing the design of the system to reflect the realities of what was available in the ground and so on and so forth. I believe at each of those junctures, changes in the design were made to reflect the realities of, what could be done. And so I think an array of things have been considered from the start. I'm not sure if that's answering your question.
I think I'm asking perhaps a different question.
Okay.
So right now, if I'm understanding correctly, we have 2 wells at the field, 2 functioning wells, and we have a plan, a plan of what to do next. That's been bid out, and we have some numbers back. So the sunk costs to date are about $282,000, and the plan is to spend close to another $300 to complete it. Is that accurate? Okay.
Correct.
So my question is, if the town, for whatever reason, decided not to spend the incremental $300,000, what would you do? How would you think about funding that $300,000? Or what would you do as an alternative to now having 2 wells on the site? What are the options here? Is the only option what you've presented, or is there any other option for us to consider?
I don't know, I mean, I guess the option, you want to take a swing at it?
Yeah. I'll let him do the finance side if he wants, but the physical side is, we looked at the options prior to doing this, which Dave hit on. It would have been great if the overburden well, we don't have any in town, but Jeremy's familiar with them, you know, much larger municipal wells are overburdened. In other words, they're not drilled all the way to the rock, they're just grabbing the water that's available above. Because Laurel was a gravel pit and they took 20 to 30 feet of overburden off of that site, there is an overburden there that has enough water in it. So while we spent a lot of money with the geologist, he came in scratching his head until we pointed out, oh, by the way, we kind of scraped the whole top surface off when they were building Back Bay. And that's why there's nothing here. That kind of shot us in the foot with that. And then we quickly looked at trying to dig a pond because Pam will tell you, just over the fence line, there's a pond that never runs out of water that helps to feed the golf course. So the issue is Laurel is flanked by wetlands on both sides. So you can imagine we'll still be trying to negotiate with Conservation Commission how we're gonna suck water out of the wetlands. So that really was not a viable option. So the safest option with the concerns in town with drinking water was to drill those 2 wells. So we have those 2 wells. We invested a lot of money in those 2 wells. It's very unfortunate that we invested as much as we did and got such a low yield. Because the low yield forced us into spending more.
For the storage tanks.
So one other option would be punch 7 more wells and try to get a bunch more low yield wells and try to talk the Board of Health into approving that. I'm not gonna go to those meetings, you could. We could put turf fields in for $1.2 million, and we could sit around and wait for MWA to run a water line in. We cannot get water from Natick, we proved that one out. Legally, we can't, so if we wanna irrigate the fields and utilize what's the capital that's already been spent, this is the only option at the moment.
Let's talk about the timeline for a second, options for the timeline. You are proposing that start construction in November. I don't know how long it takes, probably under 30 days, I'd imagine. Well, actually, in November, you have 3 weeks, right? Because you have Thanksgiving week. So what would be the objection to doing the work in the spring as opposed to November? Other than the risk that the 208-500 would change.
So spring on a ball field is usually pretty messy. New England isn't fall or spring, it's fall turns into spring and winter might happen in between. December could be perfectly good working conditions to work on it. So they might come off of Thanksgiving, you might get a snowstorm. You're not gonna get frost until January, if you get it. So they may get most of the trenching done and have it back to stable. You wanna try to get it stable so that you can start growing grass, because they're ripping up between the soccer fields. So even if it's not running, you don't wanna be taking a machine out there and digging trenches when it's raining every other day in April. So we're trying to avoid that. What day they actually start the system, it isn't as critical as when you start doing the hard digging. Just because you're trekking across pretty decent soils right now and you're gonna wreck that. So if you can stabilize it, even if you can stabilize it before it freezes, is beneficial, especially for the contractors, because they're running out of work. They're trying to book the work. This guy obviously thought he was gonna be working in November. It won't be the 1st of November. There's no way he's gonna have a contract at this point, but even if it's the 15th, 20th of November, that's better than February. You're not gonna do anything in February to start.
How long will that process take?
Yeah, it depends on when winter gets here And there's a lead time on some of the equipment. The skid will take a while, but you don't need that to do most of the work. The skid being like this pump unit that's built, that needs to get manufactured. So I think that's probably a couple months out, but
It's 12 weeks.
it's a couple weeks of digging and putting pipe and wires in the ground.
So you do all the underground work prior to the winter, and then the tanks, I assume, are above ground, and the pump system would be above ground,
Yeah,
and that would be done
yeah, the tanks are placed on top of like a leveling pad that they're gonna put way up. I
concrete pads of some sort, or?
can't remember if it's concrete or gravel, but
Okay.
How big are these tanks?
There's 3 5,000 gallon tanks.
5,000 gallons.
They're insulated or something, so they don't freeze.
what's that?
They're insulated so they don't freeze like over.
No, they'll never have water in them
And you
when the
could
freezing
run out
comes.
just like the pipe.
So that's a cost too. That's a cost. To winterize them.
What's that?
It's a cost. I'm just saying it's one more thing to do, to winterize 3 5,000 gallon tanks. May I ask a quick question?
Please.
All right, so I understand Jameson, that was 2024 meeting, so not this year's meeting, but the last year's meeting was 100,000. I could, 100 or 150, 100,000, right? So only 5,000's been used on that so far? 3,000.
Correct.
So what's the status on that? And if we don't need to use the funds for ARPA, I'm looking at Jeremy, until 2026, is there any way to do that? Like does that really need to be used, or is that kind of on a hold project, or can money be used from that 95,000?
So, no, that project's going forward.
It is, okay,
The timing of it is what's in question and when it's gonna get done, but it is moving forward. That money is gonna get spent on Jameson 4.
okay,
Ultimately, the question is how much, is it gonna cost? That Jameson 4 renovation, I can only speak so much publicly about what Joe Shore Baseball saw.
okay, I just was asking if that's something, when you asked for something,
They're,
another option.
They helped us with other projects and they paid completely for the lights. They may or may not give any money towards Jameson 4. I think it's gonna depend on what comes back for estimates in terms of what they'd like to see done and what we can actually afford. So it's all gonna get spent. In terms of actually what occurs and when it occurs, that's TBD. But that money's gonna get spent.
Okay.
As far as the capital appropriation,
Mhm.
the remaining funds, if town meeting so desired, could reappropriate the funds to another use. But until town meeting takes an action to reappropriate those funds, they're set aside for the Jameson.
Right, I understand that. I'm saying that,
That would be the action that would be needed to reappropriate them towards another use.
thank you, that's what I wanted to clarify. Mhm.
The ARPA funds had to be committed or allocated through an interdepartmental agreement by the end of last calendar year, which it was. And so now we are committed to use them for what's outlined in the 4 corners of that interdepartmental agreement.
Mhm.
And, whatever that use is, would need to just pass the straight face test as far as being used at Laurel Fields.
Right,
Could something else other than this project meet that definition if possible?
and that has to be spent by next year.
Correct.
Okay.
Adam.
The contractor that's bid, the one that we selected or would select, install the system, do they do the maintenance as well? Maintenance as in draining and everything, just.
No, they don't. They're only for the actual construction of the building system.
Is there like a warranty on the system itself or operating life?
My understanding is that depending on the component, some of the components have their own warranty. depending on which one it is.
So the annual draining and stuff, that'd be something you would get a third party to do, or we'd get a third party.
It would either be something the town would have to take on, or you'd have to hire someone to do it.
Seems like it's a very easy system to drain. Being the tanks are above ground. They just need to blow the lines up, so. It's not much harder than doing a residential.
I'd like to take this opportunity to see if any members of the public would like to ask any questions or make comments. If you would, either raise your Zoom hand or raise your physical hand to be recognized. Seeing none.
I don't see anyone.
Anybody else have any questions, comments, observations? I guess what's disappointing for all of us, I'm sure, is that a project that starts out at 350 ends up at 575. And I think there are probably many reasons for that. We can't point at any one of them. The only thing we can do is learn from it and not let it happen again with any project within the town. These are difficult things. There's a lot of unknowns, and I am sympathetic to that. So is there would anyone like to make a motion? Jeremy?
Yeah.
Oh, there's not a motion, it's just a general approval?
Just general comment. So I don't know, maybe you've discussed this before at the beginning before I joined, but this does require a vote of the select board and advisory to change the limits
Right.
for revolving funds.
Mhm.
So the select board did consider this at their last meeting. They voted 2 abstentions. Two members wanted to hear what advisory thought, and then 3 voted affirmatively to raise the limit. So it was not a unanimous vote of the select board.
Right.
I think going forward, the capital plan should include, the 5-year look ahead should include all capital regardless of funding source. Capital funded from any particular revolving fund should be identified on the 5-year capital plan regardless of where it's funded from. So, that would be one lesson learned, is that all budget makers should be urged, required, prompted, urged again to seriously look at with their capital projects, looking out 5+ years, and fully identify the costs and put them in the capital plan. If they're proposed to be funded by the revolving fund, that should be identified in the capital plan.
So that there are 3 sources of funding: free cash, bonds, and revolving fund.
And possibly others.
Okay. And I'd like to just add to that, if I could. I think we should, as a lesson, require written plans so that we can all be on the same page with capital projects, and not with oral presentations, but with documentation, including much more solid estimates as to what these costs are going to be. I think we've experienced, even in the recent past, many times where projects come out significantly higher than the initial anticipated cost. Fortunately, some have come out a little bit lower, but the pain comes from not having a complete, well-thought-out plan documented. The plans may be complete and well thought out, but they're not documented, so all the different groups that need to look at them are looking at the same thing. So I think we should, think about requiring that kind of documentation before considering a program. That would be my takeaway too. And lastly, who the project manager is going to be, I think, is critical as well. Who takes ownership and responsibility to see a project through from A to Z? And it probably should be an employee of the town, not a volunteer and not an elected official who may not be in place during the entire project from beginning to end. That would be my other takeaway from this. Other thoughts? So I guess somebody needs to I guess I'll make a motion. Now, when making the motion, doesn't mean we can't discuss it further, or it's obviously still subject to vote. But I'll make the motion to authorize the Recreation Committee, correct me where I go wrong here. The other thing I like to see is have the people who bring these things to the committees to actually write the motion so that we can not have to do it off the top of our hats.
They do that for the select board.
Yeah, right. So I'll make a motion that authorizes an increase in revolving fund expenditures for the Recreation Committee for fiscal year 2026 by $133,000.
The select board friendly amendment added, in addition to that motion, they added that this was a one-time adjustment to the revolving fund.
A one-time adjustment, I agree, we'll add one-time adjustment for the sole purpose of the Laurel Fields irrigation.
Second.
Okay. Is there further discussion, questions, clarifications?
One clarification. So you said earlier the revenue from the field rental was low and then it was much higher. I guess catching up, you said sort of average was 120, 125 or something per year.
In terms of the average revenue from field rentals, is that it?
Yeah.
Sort of projected.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, just up until last year, we would never break it out in the revolving fund, so, but it's about 60,000 a season, right? So
Roughly it's about 60,000.
our rentals would be about 120,000 a year.
The swings in the collection of revenue have been an issue with invoicing and collecting.
I heard about that. But would this also allow the fields to be used more regularly? Like, are there times where the fields are closed because the grass is too fertile?
It wouldn't change. No, it wouldn't change the start or end of the season, in my opinion. This is mainly field availability and quality. So we have closed fields in the past to help bring them back. So the better we can maintain our fields and the higher quality are, the less often we'll need to do that.
Okay.
I
Those
just wanted to put that Divya joined about 5 after, so she's on the phone.
Thank you. George, any follow-up questions at all?
No, I mean, the questions were great. I unfortunately don't see any way of not approving it, my
Yeah.
personal opinion, but. I mean, unfortunately, they've been great questions, but, I mean, do you feel good about the project? Is it gonna, you know, let's hear something good about it, I hope.
Well, I mean, I'm mainly enthusiastic in terms of the support that we've heard from, received from the town, from the organizations that utilize the facility. They're excited about the project. They would love to see the people who are there every day, the ones who are paying our rental fees, are excited about the project because they would like to see a better playing surface for what they're paying for.
Is there a drainage component to the trenching? Is it both like for the pipes and also just to alleviate the RARs and a May like we had?
So thankfully, even after the May that we had, Laurel has swales, mainly for drainage. It actually drains really, really well. We lost most of the revenue that was lost in May from field rentals was mainly because of the clay surface, the challenges with that. Laurel actually usually recovers within 24 hours, even after a 3-inch storm. Because there's some drainage.
I guess my observation would also be that water is one element, I think, of maintaining the field. It might be interesting to see if there's an agronomist that we should hire as a consultant to help us get it into the best possible shape that we can if we're making this kind of investment. And this is dependent on when the electricity, the power comes in as well, but perhaps engaging somebody now could help prep, get us ready for it, have us thinking about what budget should be, how much should seed and chemical cost, what should punching holes in it be. There are other alternatives now about punching holes, but you can also put sand in there at the same time. There's a whole bunch of options. And think about the budget for fiscal 27, anticipating that the system's going to be up and running at some point.
Yeah, it's definitely just one piece of it.
Right. It's one piece of a multi-pronged process to get those fields in great shape. And so I wouldn't be dollar wise and penny wise and dollar foolish here. Let's, we're going to go this far. We might as well go, to the end zone on it. All right. So we'll call the question. We'll do a roll call vote since we're not all physically here. Nora?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
George? Divya?
Aye.
I did hear a muffled aye there. Penn?
No.
And I am aye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
May I add a footnote to my vote?
Please.
I just, I agree that there was no way not to pass this, and I'm glad we did. I just don't like being in that position. I think this project is a mess, so I just really didn't want to have it finally rolling forward with a unanimous vote on a project that is this compromised.
Thank you. Thank you.
Why don't we, if you don't mind, can we take a 5-minute break? And we'll reconvene at 8:48.
Start the recording.
Thank you.
I can't get rid of that raised hand. I can't get rid of the raised hand. And then audio. I can do audio too, I think. I can't. I think that even on co-host, I can't do audio either. Paul?
I made you and
I know,
you
but
and Jeremy are both
but
co-hosts.
sometimes co-hosts can't do the audio. I can't do the audio.
We can hear you.
Back on, it's recording. The mic's on, it's not this way.
Okay, we're good to go? Okay, welcome back, everybody. So the next item on the agenda is to,
It's still saying that. Just hold on. Am I here? Can somebody confirm that you can hear?
We can hear you.
okay,
Okay.
thank you. Next item on the agenda is to discuss the guidance letter and specifically determine a recommendation for the COLA for employees not covered by collective bargaining agreements or pre-existing employment contracts. The Personnel Board has made a recommendation of 3 to 3.5%, fairly broad range. So I open up the floor to begin the discussion. Anybody want to open up the conversation? Opinions, thoughts? The draft that I sent out was merely a placeholder for the number. I did put in the 2.8%, which was the Social Security COLA number that came out recently.
Personnel recommended.
Personnel recommended 3 to 3.5%.
And then the report that I think you sent out, was it today? No, not sure what day it was, but there was a BLS report that did finally come out, is that right?
Yes. It had the CPI index for the 12-month period ending September 30 of 25%, and that index was 3%.
Yeah. So it seemed like.
That's a national number. Pen?
Whether inflation is more or less here than nationally.
So one of the things I try to keep in mind, since I've been on advisory, is that, it's one thing to look at, and we look at how the town spends money, but I want to try to keep in mind that we're actually spending taxpayers' money or advising on where that goes. And I think one of the things I've realized, and I realized it fairly early on in advisory, is there are a couple of pools of residents that I think don't get full attention. And they are some of the elderly, people who've been in town for decades, and young people who grew up in town who are trying to stay in their parents' homes. And we hear a lot and we talk a lot about the people who move to Sherborn with their kids for the schools. And a lot of those people are willing to shrug off and able to shrug off tax increases. Whereas, those are two populations, the elderly and the people who want to stay in town, who are actually committed to the town, who've been here for years, who can't necessarily shrug those off. So that's always in my mind. And one of the things that goes along with that is if anybody comes up to me and say, all right, can you defend the number you advocated for any number? And I want to be able to do that. So my first thought would be to, since we're looking at COLA, I think first of all, we look at COLA as COLA, and the federal recommendation is 2.8. So that's what I would look at.
I guess I would say that I might lean a little bit more towards 3, which I don't think is a huge dollar difference in the scheme of things. But it does seem like it foots with the BLS report. And I also am sympathetic to people that work in the town, are not necessarily the most high paid employees. So I guess I'm sympathetic to inflationary costs. Food costs look like they were some of the items that were especially named in the BLS report. I must admit I did not have a lot of time to read it carefully, but that was my kind of recollection from what I did read. So I'm not too far off from where you are, Penn. 2.8, 3%. I don't know, but I'd be looking to at least kind of line up with that, I think.
I wouldn't even arm wrestle you for the difference.
I would be
No kidding.
definitely at 3%. I think the insurance has increased. There's no, I've learned this affects about 30 employees in town, if I'm correct.
It's about 45.
45? Oh, you did get the number, okay. And there's no merit-based pay. This is what it is, it is what it is. There's issues with merit-based, it's just a lot of time, right, going into what that is and all that. So if this is the only thing, and if it's, I would definitely go with the 3% for sure, and not the 2.8.
Is the 2.8, the federal one, taken like an average of inflation across the country, like Alabama and Massachusetts?
Yeah, the 2.8% as the placeholder is the Social Security adjustment for 2026. So last year, the previous year was 2.5, and that was what the COLA adjustment was for the town employees. And it went increased a bit to 2.8% for 2026.
I just wasn't sure if it's taking data from
national.
the country.
Yeah,
Right.
because it's the Social Security number for everybody.
So I can just see that skewing a little lower than what Massachusetts and a town like Sherborn would need to support.
And these are non-union.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a long-winded way of me saying I'm definitely on board with 3% versus the 2.8%.
I mean, you might be able to argue for something between 3 and 3.5, like 3 1/4.
And as I understand, it was 32,000 for every point.
No, not even quite 30.
So,
29,500.
okay, so 30,000 then for every point.
And this is like.
For a percentage.
So,
That's where I'm not following. What does that mean?
So for every COLA percentage that goes up, it costs the town about $30,000.
So 3%
Based on
like
everybody's current salary.
A 90, and then 3 1/4 would be what? A quarter of.
It would be 97,000,
Yeah.
97.5, yeah.
mhm.
The other observation I make is that the COLA and the inflation rate, the CPI change is a backward-looking analysis. And the question would be a question could be what's going to happen over the next 12 months, given the current economic circumstances. And I think you can make arguments both ways. Potential increase in inflation, and if there's depending on what happens in the labor market, there could be a decrease in inflation. So I may just make the observation with no opinion on it. How's that for commitment?
We're almost there.
Anyone have a crystal ball?
We don't only think of inflation, right? How do we look at it historically, like what we do every year? It's not just that the cost of bread went up 5 cents, you do whatever. What do we generally base it on? Is it
Well, I think
cost of living, or
I think
is
historic. I
that
think
people
it.
need to make more money every year?
Yeah, I think historically it's been, truly a cost of living adjustment. Sometimes it's been the Social Security adjustment, and other times it's been the Consumer Price Index change. There was a period of time when during COVID, when inflation was at 9%, 8%, but I don't believe the town's labor rate went up by that rate. I think it was probably 4%, I think was the max. Yeah,
Social Security one, like 8.7%.
right.
Was there one that went up 6%? Was there one year when the COLA was 6 in town?
No.
It's like the merit thing. Is not really that relevant, right? If it, because I imagine the employees can be terminated if they're not doing the job that they're supposed to do, right? Like they're not.
He's not answering. No.
Most town employees in this group are employed.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess,
Authority
well, my point
varies.
is,
It's not all through the select board town administrator's office. There are other appointing authorities that make those decisions beyond the select board office and myself.
I guess my point is 3%. If somebody's showing up, I mean, I know where I work, if I have an associate attorney that shows up for work, 3% is a ridiculous amount to raise their salary. It's ridiculously low. It's so de minimis that unless somebody is literally not showing up at work, that person would be terminated. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, I think we need to be financially responsible, but we need to recognize that people need to be paid more. So, I mean, I'm in support of at least the 3%.
Right, and within the context of the overall budget of the town and the context of the difference between 2.8 and 3 in terms of the dollar amount, and in the context of even 2.8 and 3 1/4, it's not, it doesn't move the needle in terms, these aren't the big dollar amounts that we want to fight, but it might make a difference to somebody, an individual person, at least about how they feel about
Yeah, anything
It's not the actual
morale.
dollar amount, it's about how they feel about how they're being treated and what they might hear is happening in other towns.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Can I jump in?
Please.
Yeah, I understand, because this sort of comes up every year, and I have, mixed feelings about it. And I think that, I would be very happy to go with 3. Like I said, I want a defensible number. The problem is, as I see it, is Sherborn does not have a mechanism for raising salaries. other than this. And this is not the mechanism for that. We are tasked with a COLA increase, first of all. The other thing is the decisions about salary increases, as opposed to something mechanical like a COLA increase, are management. And we're not management. We're supposed to be oversight of budget and management. And the fact that the town does not have a mechanism in place is, I think, unfortunate. I think it's a problem, but I'm extremely leery for a number of reasons about making our COLA adjustment the mechanism for raising salaries. If salaries are a problem, then that's a separate discussion. And I don't think we're the people who are supposed to be doing that. And that, I think it muddies the water. And I would rather, anyway, over expanding. But basically, as I said, I'd like a defensible number, but also I don't think it's our place to step into what is essentially a management position, which is we're discussing compensation. That's not what we are tasked with.
Jeremy, you had your hand.
Yeah, I just want to mention, so, this COLA is for the non-union employees.
Right.
However, those other bargaining units that represent more than 45 employees will look at this number when they do negotiations. So just to put that out there, that there is,
It's compounding.
it could be compounded.
Right.
Are they typically able to negotiate more?
Not necessarily. I mean, those, whatever that is, if it's the educator's contract, which is currently beginning discussions for a 3-year contract, they would have their arguments, and it would be considered that.
That's also a little apples to oranges because we have the fun of doing this every year. They're doing 3 years at a whack.
Paul?
Right. So I'm comfortable with the 3.0% as well. Though it seems to me that we should have a more systematic way to decide on what the COLA number is, right? I think it's better for us. It seems weird for us as a committee to arbitrarily decide this. It seems like it would be better for the employees to know, okay, we follow this metric, maybe the Social Security COLA or that adjusted for Massachusetts, but it just seems like, it seems wonky for us to decide this every year versus, to me, it would be better, I think, to decide what's fair and then have that be just something that employees could expect, if you will. So given that, how did we decide last year? Last year was 2.5%, is that right?
Right, that was the Social Security
COLA,
adjustment,
right?
yeah.
So I'm comfortable with 3.0 this year, but I think going forward, it would probably make sense to say, pick a metric and use that metric because like kind of inflation is low now, but in a different environment, right? The Social Security COLA could be much higher, and that would be a beneficial thing for employees. So,
I'd also point out that those key employees that have employment contracts, although their base pays may be adjusted by the new contract, generally speaking, their annual increases are also tied to this recommendation. So you could have the police lieutenant, police chief, fire chief, town administrator, all with contracts with a up-to-date base, but then they get the COLA adjustment. There may be a floor, but it's the greater of the floor or the COLA adjustment recommended by the town. I assume that when you've calculated the 30,000 per 1%, you included those.
I included the ones that were dependent on if the floor, COLA.
Right.
Like, let's say the police chief.
Okay.
But for, someone like Jeremy, who in his contract, it has a percentage. I did not include him.
What did the personnel board look at, or do we know?
Mary.
Sorry.
We have Mary here, and then somebody raised her hand to speak. Nancy raised her hand to speak. Or,
Sorry,
Nancy.
Nancy, would you like to
Well,
make a comment?
I would very
And-
much, I'm very pleased at the way the conversation is going, but I'm no longer an employee. I'm no longer on personnel. I've been both in the town. I grew up here and I am Old Penn, but I am still a taxpayer. And I really truly subscribe to not balancing the budget on the backs of the people who carry the water for the town. And as you have mentioned, the core of these people do not have contracts. They are not part of a union. They have no bargaining power. And they do the upfront work for the town. It is such a small number of people that are part of the budget that to be concerned, as you said, over a percentage or two, wherever you are. I think if Deb were here, she could tell you exactly how much each percentage costs the town, but it's such a small piece. And I know when I was on personnel, we would study not only what the Social Security increment was, but we would also look at the towns around, because we have to remember where we are as far as a community within other communities. And this is the way we make our adjustments on how we pay people. And it's unlike the private sector. It's a very public process, and fairness is really very important if you're going to have good morale. And also, I would urge you very much to go with the suggested 3% that's on the table, or better if you want. But I would like my song of years consistently is, please don't balance the budget on the path of least resistance, which is these employees. Thank you.
Nancy.
Tish had a comment and then Mary.
Mary's on the Personnel Board. Mary, would you like to make a comment, question, observation?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. So I'm the newly elected, I guess, chair of the Personnel Board, sort of by default. I didn't say no quickly enough, I think, but I'm happy to be doing it. And I appreciate Nancy's comments. I appreciate all of your comments tonight. And I can give you a little background on sort of how we landed where we did. Diane and Jeremy do a great job kind of keeping us on task with obligations like this, annual COLA recommendation that needs to come to you. So on the 16th, we voted 2-0. There's only a group of 3 of us on the board now, and there were 2 of us in the meeting. We voted on a range. And the reason for that was that it was the best information we had at the time, we felt. Jeremy had provided us some detail on past COLA increases. We looked at some available data from the government despite the shutdown. The CPI had not been published yet. It was just published last week. And thanks to Stephen for attending that meeting, but also for sharing some government reports that he had come across, which was helpful. So to Paul's comment, it's a little bit of an imperfect rubric right now, but I do think that, looking at the CPI data of 3%, listening to the Fed share data today, and then understanding that there's still quite a bit of uncertainty on, core CPI, goods and things with pending and potential tariff up and down over the next 12 months, is something that we should consider. I also think that I do agree that, what Nancy said, that, this is a very small part of the overall town budget. But the transparency of how the decision gets made, I think, is super important for the employees as well as for you guys on advisory and the select board and all the taxpayers, as Penn said. So, I think that the CPI data shows 3% inflation. I think it's only fair to say that we stick with something that sort of allows our employees to keep up with that. So thanks again for your support, Stephen, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Appreciate your feedback.
Tish wanted to make a
Tish,
comment.
would you like to make a comment?
Yes, thank you so much. You can hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So just a point of clarification, the CPI for the Northeast in September was not 3%, it was 3.3% in the Northeast. So those statistics for 2024 were 3.2, 23, 3.7, 22, 7.1. So I appreciate very much the recognition that we're in the Northeast. We are not anywhere else in the country. And the other thing I was going to mention is that employees in town, and I am one, I should disclose that for those that don't know me. I'm the assistant treasurer collector. Social Security, if it is deemed that 3% is the appropriate rate for a Social Security adjustment, town employees then have to wait 6 months before that because we're on the municipal calendar. So life happens in those 6 months. So we're always chasing the Social Security designation. Now you can say that can play to our favor, but historically it never ever has, because we don't, when the Social Security rate adjustment is higher, we don't see that. So I'd appreciate you considering both those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Tish.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Please do.
So I'd like to make a motion to recommend a 3.0% COLA increase for employees not covered by collective bargaining agreements.
Second.
So further discussion?
So the Northeast CPI is 3.3%, and the personnel board gave that range, sort of hedging maybe for that sort of Social Security 6-month window, or kind of looking ahead. So the uncertainty principle is really, that extra 0.2% is just sort of that hedge, or was that part of the discussion?
Is that for me? Sorry, Stephen, shall I respond?
Sure.
Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm being, 100% candid that, there hadn't been any government data published when we met. We had some inklings of August reports and August CPI data that we had looked at. There was some speculation about, the numbers coming in a little bit higher, above 3. So, I think we took that into consideration and felt that we could, do the best job recommending a range.
I just would I'm not coming out either way in this yet, but I do make the observation, as Jeremy said before, we may be talking about these 45 employees, but there are hundreds of employees in the town. So if the 3, I don't know that it would move the needle 2.83 on a town-wide payroll. I'm not sure what the value of that would be. Going up to 3.25 may be a little bit rich, and it has a compounding effect because it becomes the new base going forward. So it's just not a one-time increase. It's an increase forever. So we just have to be a little bit cautious about that as well.
Even because future COLAs would be based on that other number?
No, because the person's new pay is now 3% higher than it was before. And it's always going to be that. It never comes back. That wouldn't come back down unless there was a turnover in the employee in the position. So that.
Yeah. And normally what happens, you get a new employee, it's a higher salary rate than
So Jeremy, just as a point of information, my understanding is that there's some new rules coming out about transparency and pay. Do you know when the report will be coming out first and what it might contain?
The report that the consultant is doing for the town?
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, there was a Salary Transparency Act that was established by Mass General Law. The effective dates kind of are phased in depending on the size of the employer. Requires transparency by way of making available a pay range for positions, not only when you advertise to fill a position, but current employees could request it. That has not been the tradition here in Sherborn. Tradition has been that somebody's in the role, makes a certain salary, and there's a COLA adjustment that adjusts that. There isn't a range. And previously it was noted that there really is no mechanism in the personal administration plan to adjust salaries based on merit beyond the COLA. So that is a management constraint. But we hired a consultant to help us do a screening of peer communities, listed about 13 communities of similar size, similar demographics, similar geographic area. They're also helping us to update all the position descriptions so that it comes from one voice, not 15 different voices. They are seeking, I think there's like 2 more communities they need data from to complete the survey. And then they'll be helping us put together the classification of positions, what positions make sense to be classified together, and we'll be helping to establish a pay range for those positions based on the market survey.
Okay, so we will soon have.
Yes, so the short of it is soon have that data. Optimistically 2 weeks, probably more likely 3 to 4 weeks.
So then we'll have a better understanding as to whether or not our pay rates are competitive with our counterparts.
Correct. The consultants, based on what they've found so far without the benefit of actually seeing the full data, has noted, just in general, that the current compensation of similar positions appears to be competitive with peers. Very general statement, don't have anything back up.
Right. And have you heard from your peers as to what COLA adjustments are being recommended?
I haven't yet, so that's can be a closely guarded secret. We will, over the next couple of months, start to get some of that information from peers. Some of the surrounding communities have different ways of budgeting and different personnel rules, so it's not apples to apples as far as how they do salary adjustments.
Thank you. Pam,
Nancy has her hand up and Divya has her.
I think, Pam, did you have a question as
Oh,
well?
sorry, Pam.
I just wanted to say one thing, like, COLA is COLA, it's cost of living, right?
Hmm?
It's not, we shouldn't be evaluating people's salaries for this. That's a whole separate topic that Jeremy's been addressing for us. The cost of living, I don't know about you guys, but my grocery bill is more than 3% higher. Our health insurance is going up by 12, 15%.
Right.
And us as employees are working with the town to increase our co-pays and to maybe have a deductible so that our plans are lower, so that it doesn't cost the town and us so much money. And I think it's unfair to say you have to monitor or watch what you're giving a small group of people because of the unions and, contracted employees. The unions and the contracted employees have the opportunity to increase their base salaries. So this is just about cost of living. This doesn't have to do with salaries or anything like that. So most of the contracts in the unions already have their cost of living built in at like 2.5% or whatever the COLA is for the non-union employees. So because they're unionized, you shouldn't give a COLA that's appropriate to the people that aren't unionized or have contracts that can say 2.5 or the higher COLA.
Who else was, thank you, Pam.
Divya and Nancy.
Divya?
Hi. So I'm leaning towards the 3 too, but then considering what I've heard all across, I have 2 points to make. One is retention as a bottom line. We need all our employees to run everything that we need to be run, right? 2 is there any way that we could split it and say we do a baseline COLA adjustment and then we put a percentage based on, we could vote on it later based on how the market goes.
You could always change your guidance later, but your budgets.
Yeah, we could always make a change later.
Mechanism to have a base COLA and then have a pool of money for performance.
Right, that
currently does not exist as a system.
I thought that Divya was suggesting if we suggest 3 and some information comes out later, that we reissue the recommendation to some larger or smaller number. Larger,
I
most
mean-
likely.
I know it's a hard one to pull, but I feel like trying to be fair to our employees and keeping the baseline for the larger group of employees, it's a balancing act at this point. So just thought maybe for like a performance, you could put the pool aside and say that's going to be based on the management discretion going forward.
That would be a great discussion to have with the personnel board and updates to the personnel administration plan.
Yeah.
Can I make one comment regarding retention?
Please.
I don't, tying retention to COLA is, I think they're not connected. Because not all positions are equal, should you say, and I'm not sure COLA really ties to retention, I guess.
Right, won't motivate somebody necessarily, yeah. Who else had it?
Nancy wanted to talk.
Nancy?
Yes.
I just wanted to say, when I started working there, I was there for 30 years or more, we had a range, and it didn't work because no one could move in the range. There was no mechanism to move within the range for the salaries. And the other point I wanted to make is in that whole time, we never exceeded what the unions or contracts had. If anything, we were behind them, and they were able to negotiate better. The schools, the police, everyone was able to negotiate, as you say, 3-year contracts or whatever, at a better COLA than we received in town hall. So I wish there was a magic answer, but I know it's so easy to look at, well, we could save a few bucks here if we didn't go an extra percent. But when you look, I mean, I think 3% sounds fair and it sounds conservative. But I just want you to know that we've tried the things that you're suggesting now in the past, and it isn't easy. No matter how you slice it, it just isn't easy. Especially if you have to depend on the personalities of department heads as to how they deal with their personnel. Everybody's different, so it's hard to maintain a salary for like jobs that were fair and comparable. So that's another headache for you down the road. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm just into limiting the issue a little bit, and I just think a huge debate about, whether it's 3% or 3.25% is ridiculous. I just, with all the other issues that the town has, I mean, we just heard this thing about irrigation of fields. I never irrigate my fields at my house. Grass does just fine, but that's just an editorial comment aside. I just think that we have big ticket items in the town that require scrutiny, and I think this is an issue of, I think a few people said better than what I said at the beginning, which is if somebody's showing up to work, a 3% increase is a nonsensically low increase. So I think we just have to be as fair as we possibly can without being irresponsible. So I guess long-winded way of saying, I definitely support the 3%. If somebody wanted to go 3.25, 3.5%, I wouldn't have a problem with that either. I don't think it's worth.
How about we meet in the middle, 3.15? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just like,
You have a motion that was made and seconded.
Right, but we're having discussion, and
Right.
someone can call the question, I suppose, if they feel that there's consensus around, but I think it's a healthy conversation.
Right.
To me, the compelling thing is this Northeast Consumer Price Index. Social Security is taken from the entire country, so it brings in the areas that have much lower cost of living. Northeast has a high cost of living. Just from what other people have said, it seems like this area in the Northeast is particularly a high cost of living. If that was 3.3%, it seems, to your point, that 3% seems maybe a little low, or at least doesn't align with the true analysis of cost of living increase versus all of the other things we talked about, merit increases and salaries, et cetera. It also seems like if we are establishing cost of living increase, we should, I don't know if it's fair to consider what other groups that are a union or otherwise would, use to piggyback off of that. Like ours should just be really, what is the cost of living increase this year for, the people that we're looking at?
Jeremy, do you have open requisitions for personnel?
Yes, there's 2 current vacancies.
Being?
Actually, 3 current vacancies. Town clerk, director of assessing, and admin assistant for the Conservation Commission.
And Pam's admin assistant, but it's not and I have a vacant position and Pam has a vacant position that we haven't filled all year.
Now, are those positions presented in the budget will they be presented in fiscal 27?
We'll see.
Mine will not be.
The development.
So that could be a bit of a safety valve. If some of those part-time spots perhaps weren't filled.
Yeah, I can say that we went the whole year without our admin assistant and we have become more efficient. And I'm not going to fill that position. Will be a savings of about $14,000 on my budget.
And on the assessor, the role is currently being fulfilled by a consultant?
The bulk of that role currently. We're unsure if that's sustainable or not.
And is there, are you still negotiating for potential regionalization of that position?
So if we went to 3.25, that dollar amount, correct me if I'm wrong, is about $7,500
$7,500
to the 90,000?
The extra 1/4%.
The extra 1/4% is 7,500?
So I think I'm an advocate of a higher number, and I'd like to suggest a friendly amendment to 3.25 with the thinking or the hope that some of these requisitions not be filled. That the organizational structure be analyzed for potential saving. That makes sense?
Quite honestly, that'll move the needle more.
Right. Yeah. Any feedback, thoughts, Jeremy? Do you want to comment on that at all?
Haven't started developing the budgets yet, at least the budgets that I have input on, so certainly take that guidance. I'm not sure how it's going to translate in this budget that will be submitted, but.
Well, we'll have
So
another
we-
run at it.
Didn't talk about this, but I had the same kind of thought. Yeah, 3.25 after discussion, the CPI in the Northeast.
So I'm proposing to Paul for a friendly amendment. He can reject it, and then we can vote on his motion.
I don't know what the procedures are. I mean.
We take it off?
Motion on the table. I can remove the motion if that's what you think
I'm
we
not
should
sure
do.
either, or you can amend it, I think, if you want to. You don't have to.
I don't want to amend it. Someone else can
Okay.
make a different motion.
Okay.
So I can
So-
withdraw my motion. I don't know if I can do that. But
Well, we can vote on it and
Let's vote on
no.
it. I make a motion to withdraw the,
Well, we can call the question. We'd have to vote to call the question. Then I assume it would be voted no.
Okay.
And someone else can make a new motion.
okay.
So continuing the discussion, it seems like this is fair based on what we voted, like the reasons why we voted on this last year. It just seems like I would be supportive of a higher number, but it just seems like we're kind of changing our mind mid-flight here, right? We chose a number based on the same criteria as last year. We're within the range of the personnel board, so I'm not sure why we're not comfortable with 3.0, but that's.
Valid points.
It just shows you this is a very blunt tool that you have available to yourselves.
Right.
And it's very ineffective.
Right.
it's begging to be improved.
What's the process for doing that?
It would need to be a change to the personnel administration plan,
What's the process for doing that?
discussions with the personnel board.
What, and you're talking about you're talking about merit-based pay, or you're talking
A
about?
different structure. I mean, currently, the
Right.
town bylaw requires the personnel board to suggest a COLA adjustment to advisory, and then advisory makes guidance. But there's very limited tools available to the quote management of the community to adjust salaries outside of this COLA. We will find when the data comes in from the consultant, from peer surveys, that some of your positions will be competitive, some will be over the average, some will be below the average. But, you know, your guidance basically just puts a flat adjustment on everyone, regardless of where they sit compared to their peers.
Can I ask then,
Because it's just a COLA.
Oh,
so was the sentiment that 3.25% is what we would get behind? Is that the sentiment? Because if so, I'll modify my motion. Is that kind of what I'm
I
hearing?
think so.
I think so.
Right.
Mhm.
So I'd like to modify my motion to recommend, instead of 3.0, a 3.25% COLA increase for employees not covered by collective bargaining agreement.
I second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call since we're not all physically present. Nora?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Divya?
Aye.
Penn?
Aye.
And I am I as well.
That gets to 8-0, is that correct?
Yes, thank you, everybody. We do have on the agenda, if people have any advisory committee member updates. Does anybody want to provide an update on anything?
I'll try to meet. On the regional school committee, Nora and I, last night, met with the regional school committee, Dover Warrant, and the school leadership as a means of closer communication between all of us. So I can update what we talked about. So, like, there's a change in accounting from the schools coming, and it deals with the special ed reimbursement, also called a circuit breaker, right? This is the reimbursement for kids in town who have special needs, right? And this is partially reimbursed by the state. And the state Department of Education is asking, like, in the past, those expenses came out of the Pine Hill budget, and the state's asking the regional school committee to sort of take on that, the invoicing on that, and putting it in their budget. So it'll be a budget change. It's kind of like the same money, but just paid for a different budget. So Dawn kind of summarized that for us. That's kind of one change in accounting that will change where the money is, right? So rather than being at that sped expense being in the Pine Hill budget, it'll be charged out to us from the school committee.
Can I just make just for the new members here, it's called circuit breaker. So really it's, I would call it, when we talked about this, it's anything essentially, and you'll hear more about it, over $54,000, about that. Paul, you can help me out. Over 54,000 then goes into what's, I would call like out of district placement over that amount. So that gets reimbursed. Help me out, Paul, at 75%, 75%. There's also a component, if there's, that's kind of flexible with travel expenses can get up to 60. But the thing is, we have to have a cushion somehow there of where that money, because it gets reimbursed the next year. So the state is highly looked at, it's highly audited. The regional schools take care of it. Anything under that 54 is then done by the town, correct? So if that is not part of that, but it's a high, over that number is called the circuit breaker.
So can
So it's the refunding back.
So I just want to put numbers in theoretical numbers so see if I understand correctly. So if there's a student and the total cost of that student's education is $100,000, the town is on, it will cover cover all of it the first 54 will see no money back, but of the remaining 46, 75% of that, in theory, could be reimbursed. Is that, do I roughly have that right?
I have something here. On $100,000,
Oh, I made that up.
There's a spreadsheet we can pass on. It has.
I have the spreadsheet. On 100,000, the threshold is 53,431. So 46,569 is not eligible for reimbursement. So the tuition reimbursement is 34,926. Okay, so
Is that
that's,
75% of the 46?
yes, it looks like that is.
Yeah.
And the remaining 25% is not reimbursed of the 11,642. Okay,
So it'd be like 66, but it's a, okay, sorry.
then we have, no, that's okay. So basically, then you have transportation costs. This is just used as an example. 60% was reimbursed at 15,000, and we can add this to the record. So the remaining,
That sheet to you all.
yeah,
So I'll send it to Steve.
remaining 25% not reimbursed is 10,000. So the total cost to the town is 75,000. The total claim would be 125 for the 25 in the transportation. Net costs owed by the town is 75, and the reimbursement is 49,000. So basically, go ahead, Paul.
The other interesting update from the regional school committee was their capital plans. And there's one big one at the region coming up. It's the restoration of the high school rooftop HVAC units, which in total is 1.5 million. So the towns would each be about half of that. So that's kind of coming up, right? The other interesting part of the meeting was Dover Warren, we summarized like various towns' situations, and Woody, the chair of Dover Warren, mentioned that the big issues they have are kind of different from us. They have a big deferred capital expense that they have to fund, right? And the other big change that he mentioned was that Dover has an excess levy capacity of $2.5 million. So they have a lot more cushion to fund budgets from excess levy versus we're at, I think, 700K-ish or 740K. So I thought that was just interesting. And I'll put that in the minutes.
Anybody else?
Oh, and I will say that the fields were done, and I saw a picture, I haven't been there in person, but the high school field, it just looks amazing. So they were able to pull that off and get it done, and only make one change order to where the tossing of the toss is off to the side, and it was just absolutely stunning and beautiful, and done pretty much on time. So that was, kudos to Dawn for managing that process, and all the other people I'm sure that are involved.
Excellent. Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Paul. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second? Nora?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
George? Divya?
Aye.
Penn?
I don't want the fun to end, but yeah, aye.
And I am I as well.
9:40.
Meeting is adjourned at 9:40 PM. Thank you, everybody.